Hello. Welcome to Power and Perspective. Oh, it's Hot Mess Monday. This is I am April. This is Aaron.
Yeah, try.
No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
because
nailed it.
we don't
You
have a
got it in
guest.
two. Yeah.
Wait,
No,
this
you
is
had it the
Aaron.
first time. You were good. Yeah,
Gosh,
yeah.
bless it. And we are here to reframe conversations with empathy and humor. Today we're talking about patriotism because we just had the 4th of July, so
It seems
why
appropriate.
not?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we like to be appropriate and themed, so
Yeah, when possible.
yeah.
And we have some
We're
crazy
always
stuff
about
coming up. We're gonna be guest heavy for the next month and a half at this point.
yeah, because I just got another one. Yeah, some crazy things happening. Crazy. We're gonna talk about showing your body and then Satanism.
So you said we were talking before the show, and you said that this is something that you think about a lot. Patriotism. Do you want to get into that a little bit before we jump into kind of defining things and being official?
Yeah, totally. So I would used to consider myself a hardcore patriot. Patriot sounds weirder than patriotism. Like a patriot sounds like
I mean,
roar.
you don't look
But I
like
would
Mel
say
Gibson if that's your concern.
no, that's what I
Yeah.
was maybe that's why I was thinking of that. But I would say that I was very patriotic. I was in the military. I supported the military. Um, I just was very patriotic and like, go America. And now I question my patriotism. I do. I question it. And like, and then I would say that, well, I am patriotic to like the old America. I would say the old America, the like with the intention of the founding fathers. I'm patriotic to the intention of the founding fathers. But then the more and more I find out about that, I'm like, well, that's all effed up too. So like maybe I'm not patriotic, but I wouldn't want to move anywhere. I don't think there's a better country to live in. I just think wherever you get people and systems, it's going to be effed up. So you just pick the least F up place. I don't know. Yeah. So I would say that I have what is that? Existential crisis regarding my patriotism.
And I think that's fair. And I'm not obviously going to fight you on the government makes good things bad thing there. But and I don't know if you want to get to it now, but there's actually a C.S. Lewis quote that I have. Screw it. I mean, we might as well do it now.
Just do it.
So in the Four Loves, C.S. Lewis wrote, patriotism produces a good attitude toward foreigners, he noted. For how can I love my home without coming to realize that other men no less rightfully love theirs? Their love in no way detracts from mine, for we are not in competition. Neither wants to conform the other to its image, for it's the difference that makes each home beloved. Conquest is unnecessary and unwelcome. We probably could have left that last part out, but there we are.
No, I like it. I like it because you know what it makes. First, it makes me think a lot of things. First, there's a gosh blessed bug in here. That yeah, like I don't think any of my patriotism does not take away from anybody else who's patriotic about their country, right? It's kind of like football teams, right? My love of the Bears doesn't take doesn't mean that anybody's love of the Raiders is any less. Now, if you love the Patriots or anything, then we have an issue. But if it's like a regular team,
Oh,
then
that's sweet, sweet irony, isn't it?
right, right. Anyway, but yeah, I never had thought of. I think of diversity all the time because diversity of species in general creates a stronger ecosystem, right?
Yep.
And species, it creates a stronger species as well. So diversity is super important, and I had never related it to nations. The diversity of nations was
It's a
very
funny it's the funny thing when you think about stuff like that and you start extrapolating it, and trying to see it from a further away perspective. You find I find, I will say, that a lot of those kind of philosophies blend together, where you can relate just about anything to anybody else or anything else when you think about it long enough and start to realize that your principles or ideals are kind of homogeneous across
yes.
subjects.
Yes, and that's so fun. This is off topic right now. I'm just telling you that right now. But it's so fun, like in education, like when you in a class, like it really gets you thinking about one topic to have you relate it to a conceivably or perceivably very unrelated
Yep.
topic, right? Like I want you to know about, I don't know, like variables, and I want you to relate variables to like apples or something. I don't know.
Word
But it makes you
problems.
think, really think about it.
Yeah.
This bug is gonna drive me crazy.
Well, it's the thing that that a lot of people do incorrectly when they try to make comparisons like that. Like when you compare something to being on crack, right? Most of the people that you're talking to probably haven't been on crack, just statistically speaking. So you making that comparison, while there is an accepted like idea of that, it's really a pointless comparison. So comparing something you don't know to something you do know is a very effective way to kind of synthesize
Yeah.
the new stuff.
Yes. So are we saying that we should all try crack? So we know
I
more?
mean, I'm not
I'm,
going to tell anybody.
is
I'm not
that
going to
our
tell anybody
message?
their business. We live in America, and there are probably
That-
soon going to be states where you can do that legally. So just sit on
yeah.
it and wait it out. Um,
Oh, oh, we already did that episode, huh? I was like, we should do that
we
episode,
probably
but I
did.
think
We'll,
we
we'll
already
we'll
did
we'll revisit it for as things get crazier and crazier around the world.
when people are allowed to do
Yeah.
crack. Yeah. Stephen asked, why do you hate America? I never said I hate America. I question the intention of America. I question.
So, I mean, your thoughts here lead me to one somewhat controversial place, and it's the MAGA movement, because it literally make America great again, right?
Yes.
So is that what you're saying, that that's something that we need to do, and that it's not a great nation that we live in?
Okay. There is a scene in a movie. It's something about news. The movie is about news. My God, it's the greatest scene ever. And they asked that. And you don't know what I'm talking
No.
about?
Is it Borat?
Oh, no. Somebody, does anybody know out there? But it's like the candidates are up there, and then the person asks about making America great. Ah, darn it. Anyway, but that goes back to my thoughts of in my head originally when I started having these thoughts, I would say, yes, yeah, we need to go back to making America great again. But now that the more I know, the more I like learn and whatever, like were we great to begin with? Like what is great and what would make us great? I think we're in too deep in a lot of things to just go backwards. You know what I mean? And there are so many things that were horrible when we go backwards. So we don't want to go backwards with that. And what's to do with the country versus what's to do with society and culture? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? it's hard to separate those things and say it was better back then
Well, a lot of people
versus now.
bring up in my circles that if you stop and think about it, I say that just as a disclaimer, uh,
Oh,
that the that we are put upon, that the things that we went to war um, for our freedom from the crown, we are subject to 100, 200,000 times worse, and we accept it as is, when at the time we literally went to war against the nation's superpower over it.
yeah. Yeah, and I think of that sometimes too, like the creators of the country or the what is the founders or whatever. Like if they were to come to now, they would be like horrified of what their words have been allowed to mean.
Well, and there
You
was a
know what I
lot of
mean? And
conflict between them too in all of
yeah.
that, which is interesting if you ever read more into it.
Yeah, probably not. It's already messed with my
Oh,
head. It's ignorance is bliss, people. Just go fly the
is
bliss.
that why I'm
Fly the
always
bliss.
so miserable
Yeah.
and humble?
Oh my God. We've just we've just created so much. Okay. It's from the newsroom.
Okay, I don't think I've ever seen that.
Have you seen
I have
that
not.
movie? Oh, you have to okay, you have to watch that episode because that
Wait,
is
it's a
I
show
wish we
or
could
a movie?
no, it's a
Okay.
movie.
Oh,
I wish I could find like I can find the like clips of it, but not they ask why is America the greatest country and the candidate says it's
oh,
not.
I've seen that clip. I know I've seen that clip. Who is that? Who says it? Never mind.
Oh,
Doesn't matter.
testing the limits of my
Let's not get buried
being.
in this. So
Anyway, you should watch that. That's
talking about the greatness or lack of greatness of the country. If you believe, and I will say that generally speaking, I consider myself a patriot. I have no real intention to move. I actually appreciate the soul, I guess, of the country, and the progress we've made. Obviously not in governance, but that's a whole other thing. But I would say at large, us as a society have progressed forward from the places that we've started, because there were a lot of issues at the founding of the nation, and a lot of the most egregious ones we are working toward kind of completely erasing. Um,
yeah.
and I don't know how, like, it's such a weird thing, because one thing that is different about America is that they talk about the melting pot, right? I think that we are unique in having to balance the blend of so many different cultures. Granted, we have the land and the space for it, which makes us uniquely capable. But it also causes that, like when we talk about like community governance and things happening on a small scale, when you start scaling that up, it's impossible. Like there are people's lives who are incompatible with my ideals, but they don't have any less right to them. And that's why I think things are more complicated for us. And not to make excuses per se, but to try to approach problems with that mindset. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that is a very good point as well that I have never thought of because we talk about this when we look at like education statistics, how Finland has the best, blah blah blah, but they also have literally like all white Finland born like kids that grow up in the same kind of house. Um, but yeah, and I do always say diversity is the key to strength. So we do have a unique do you think we're the country with the most diverse population?
Um, there's nothing I could say that wouldn't be primarily from ignorance, but I would guess on almost nothing that from a broad cultural standpoint, like not being people from our continent, I guess I
Hmm.
would say probably.
That would be my guess as well. Maybe with Canada, maybe, and maybe like
Well, and
Britain
Canada has a lot of the same cultural and
issues.
yeah. If you look at the is it the First Nations people, they have a lot of issues in Canada as well that are very similar to what we have going on here. It just looks
Yeah.
different on the world stage, and because they also
Yeah.
keep their mouths shut in Canada.
I was gonna say they hide things a lot better. We're like the drunk uncle at Thanksgiving, just telling just telling all the stuff.
Yeah, there is a certain boisterousness. Do you think that boisterousness is positive?
You know what? I think that there are a lot of qualities of every nation that can be positive or negative, and but they just are.
Okay.
Like that just is,
Yeah.
and it depends on how you look at it, right? So I've heard before that when Americans go to like France, they're very like so loud and obnoxious. Um, but also we speak our mind, like, and I think that's a good thing. You know what I mean? And have conversations well, this is very generalized, but like, and have conversations. Um, the first thing that pops into my head though is they're probably ignorant conversations, but conversations nonetheless.
Well, any conversation stemming from that kind of initial reaction or distaste or stereotype is never going to be really
But yeah,
positive.
yeah. And we haven't been taught. You know what? This is such a good thought process. With the diversity in our country, you would think that we would be taught, and again, in the education system, more to have open conversations and be more open-minded.
Well, but we want everybody to be American, which has a
Yeah, so how do
fundamental meaning
you
that some
see,
people might not.
right? So what does it mean to be American? Is that what does it mean to be patriotic? What does it mean to be American?
I for me, and this was so we'll get into another quote here because I this was actually caught me off guard when I was reading about this for Tolkien. Somebody was talking about big patriotism, which was nationalism, which we'll get into in a minute, versus small patriotism, which is just patriotism. The quote was, "Hobbits are unobtrusive but very ancient people," Tolkien wrote in the prologue of Fellowship. They are hospitable, nosy, and contentedly devoted to their home, the Shire. I should like to save the Shire if I could, Frodo muses as he's about to embark on his quest. Though there have been many times when I thought the inhabitants too stupid and dull for words, and have felt that an earthquake or invasion of dragons might be good for them. Yet at the thought of parting, Frodo adds, I don't feel like that now. I feel small and very uprooted and, well, desperate. And as somebody who just moved and feels all of those things, it reaffirms to me my patriotism that there is something about this country that is worth me getting upset about because I spend a lot of time being very upset about our deficiencies. Mostly in governance, and there are people I disagree with, but those people are also upset. But to be upset about it and not to solve it just by leaving, which that's a whole other thing, but is I think the heart and soul of the idea of patriotism, right?
Did you care enough about it to be
Yeah,
upset? Yeah. That's yeah, when you like that just reminds me of like when you discipline your kids. You usually discipline them because you
yeah,
care.
because you're trying to
And if you
create better habits or instill a
yeah.
lesson.
Yeah, so you could still think I what I was reading something somewhere about oh, I think it was like about self-esteem or something or self-love. About like accepting like this is what is and I love what is, but I know it can also be better.
Yeah,
And it can be worked towards being better. Do you think, and I don't know if this is off topic, do you think that in general, this is a very broad question, do you think we as a nation can be better? Like it could even
yeah,
happen?
absolutely. And I've actually been thinking about it a lot about what the difference is between where we are and what I see as an ideal. Um, and I think that the biggest change that can happen is people being more patriotic and people being more invested. What that means for me is being more invested locally, and because as we know, people don't often vote in local elections in mass. People are focused on federal elections and things. And if we cast more of that aside and focus more on what's going on that directly impacts us, that we as a society, as a country, can get better, because that's where those changes are made.
I just think so many of our systems are broken and corrupt that with the without something large and probably detrimental, that it can't get better. Like even oh, do you see? Abigail agrees with me. She says it can't.
So then, okay, so for the sake of questioning your patriotism, if there was a war against the government, would you participate? If there was an uprising, a
I
large scale uprising.
uprising, perhaps war. No, I
Well, that's the
don't
same
know
thing.
because no, it's not. I would not kill people.
Okay, I mean, and that's an important line to draw.
Yeah, I wouldn't kill people. And I think more of a, again, of a system collapse rather than an all and out war, right? Like where systems have to be clear. I just think we need to like wipe the slate and start over again, which won't happen, but there's just there's so much inequity. There's so much that is done for a certain group of people, and because those people are the ones making the laws and control, I just can't see. I guess I don't have enough faith in people because I don't see how that can change, because I don't think the people elected, even on a local level, even when starting with good intentions, I think they get caught up in the system.
Well, and I don't necessarily disagree, but if we have a greater power as individuals to hold accountable those in local office than we do, as I always say, the further it gets away from you, the harder it is to change, the harder it is to control, which is why we should keep everything so close. Um, but if and it sucks because you're right. Like, things are good enough. We are in a
Yeah.
place in our country where things are good enough. We have a growing economy, that benefits most people. We have jobs for most people. We have good education for most people.
We have decent education for most people.
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
a whole other.
comparatively to the world, we it could be called good. Comparatively to what it could be,
Yeah, and that's fair. Yeah, and yeah, we've discussed that for sure. Um, but so that's I think the biggest issue is that as long as the people in power focus on the majority, which is the nature of our system, there won't be any uprising. That it's up to the
yeah,
people who have all those benefits. Um,
yes,
and I will say right now, other than having a place to live, having a job, generally not being harassed on the day to day, all of those things. Granted, some of them are through my own choices and everything else, but those people have to stop turning a blind eye or stop being
yeah.
discompassionate.
Or be able to be willing to sacrifice, you know, be willing to sacrifice for the good of the whole. Bill asked a good question. What would you change if you could change the Constitution? This makes me think I don't know the Constitution enough.
There would be an opt-in clause for me.
Like an opt-in per person?
Yeah. Well, so this is totally off topic, but if you think about the way that everything's structured, that we give our power to the government, right? And does being born in America, should it be an authorization for that power to be given to that entity of power, whether it's state, local, or federal? You know what I mean? Like where is it that we agree to live under these rules of society, of our society,
Yeah.
of this society, because we were born here? That's
Just
all.
your or you become a citizen. But
It's a
also,
super complicated topic that
well, but
was.
also it shows to me how little one person would matter. Go ahead, opt out. Go ahead, you 10 people. Opt out. Like what is it gonna matter? It's sort of like the union, right? In education, like 51% of I guess the teachers in Clark County are part of the union, but the other part get the benefits. You know what I mean? The union fights for all teachers. These people just aren't part of the union. Um,
Well, that's a also a public union, which creates a whole other
Well, yeah, but
set of
it's kind of like that. Those
situations.
people, if you opt out, you're still gonna have roads to drive on. You know, they're not gonna block you from the roads.
Well, and
Like
if
it's
you look at the Amish people, and I think I've brought this up before, but that they largely do not participate. That they pay their taxes. They do not use any government
they do not
services.
accept government.
Yeah, none
Yeah.
of that. They, for strange biblical reasons, pay all of their taxes. But
Do they come on podcasts?
uh, you could probably find Mennonites willing to do so. That would be an interesting conversation
Uh, About to join some
for
Facebook
sure.
groups,
I'm
people.
glad you're on that. I'm glad that's your
That would be so
strength.
interesting. I just join random Facebook groups so we can have. But you know another thing? This also is probably not part of the Constitution, and I don't really know, but that they can create a bill with 800 other little like line items. I think every line item should have to be voted on. Every line item. It you shouldn't be able to chunk things together. I don't know if that's in the Constitution,
It's
but if it is, I
unrelated.
would change it.
Yeah. Well, when they
Oh,
started, so if you look, it says Congress must meet, and I don't remember the time frame, but it's like twice a year or something. Like the idea was is that Congress wouldn't actually spend a lot. Like Congress would be a part time job. They would not spend a lot of their time doing what they're doing. Like
yeah.
it's not a
It's just
place where
supposed
you
to be
should live
quick.
like as your career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where now we live in a world where they're in session 99% of the year, and all it results in is things like that. Are you reading through chat?
Yeah.
And I agree. We do not get our power. We do not get our power from the government. We grant our power to the government
Yeah.
with restrictions as defined by the Constitution. Ideally, it's a
Yeah.
weird
And do
world
you
we
think
live
that's
in.
upheld? Okay, then let's talk about this. Do you think the Constitution as it's written is being upheld today with its intention, not with its words?
Well, it's complicated because I mean the intentions are also very varying, as you get
Yeah.
into the problems that they had in arguments constructing it. But I would say that largely, yes,
That it's upheld.
yes. I
And do
don't
you
think that
think,
that's where I don't even think that's like honestly part of the conversation at large is that it's not. It's just insufficient in
to cover
limiting.
everything?
Yeah, because we live the world is so different now.
So it's
Um,
not really the Constitution. It's and let's point out the obvious is that we are the longest running government ever. So clearly something is happening, right? Or correct. Like not like
uh,
right. Something is correct. So,
yeah, it's sustainable to a point. Yeah, we have been
yeah.
the most sustainable, and it could be because of the limits on the initial limits. Could be the reason. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a
I
pretty
think
reasonable argument.
limits on power is what because people you have to limit that and that's the thing. You have to limit the power of the people in charge or making these decisions because people are are so easily corrupted and power hungry and like trapped in this cycle that if you don't limit it and enforce it as much as you can, then you get other governments.
Yeah. And that's normally the issue I take when people want to expand government for good, is that all it takes is one person. And we're at the point
Yeah.
where the president has so much theoretical power in the cult of personality and influencing people, that is such a hindrance to progress, in my personal opinion. But that shit, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, the power, there needs to be less power. And you're right, like you said, that people say we should give the government more power for good. And I guess to be fair, there has been good created, right? But could there be that good without the government?
Historically, absolutely, the answer to that question is yes. That's a question I struggle with because I have those conversations with people, um, and it's hard, especially when, just like last week, was it last week that we were talking about the Philadelphia, the Philadelphia, the Catholic Philadelphia adoption situation,
Yeah, yeah.
where they wouldn't allow trans people into the adoption program, or trans parents to adopt, so they were cut off by the government.
Yeah.
Where if that it is a whole good or not, but that sort of thing is why, might be why, that we don't see that. If there's limits on the church has been the source historically of a lot of philanthropic efforts. And as we progress more and more toward a secular nation, which we can argue the benefits
Yeah.
or non-benefits of that, whatever, that if it's positive for that, for the philanthropic efforts, or if it's possibly helpful for the government to create those programs and then have all the negative impact that they do.
Yeah. That's a good point. That is a good point. Um, with regards to some of the comments, just so you know, I don't totally understand, but I do want to talk a little bit about, because they, in the comment section, they're talking about socialism.
Yep.
and and I get socialism, like there's huge issues with socialism, and I don't think socialism in general is the answer, but I always think of, imagine a nation where every citizen had their basic needs met, right? And this is with regards to healthcare, education, food, and a house, or a roof over their head. You know what I mean? If every citizen, and but then you have to think, it's all because people suck. Because you think, okay, so socialism, so everybody's gonna have a roof over your head, and if you work hard, you get the better stuff, right? But obviously then it's gonna turn into the projects, and those places are gonna be riddled with crime, and they're gonna suck, and people are gonna take advantage of systems, and
if if that's provided voluntarily, I agree. That's where my issue generally comes in. Well, actually, I have two issues. Is that if you provide without condition, there is stagnation, and it
yeah,
may be over generations that you see this, and not like individuals. I'm
that's a
not
good
saying if you
point.
help an individual, they will become stagnant, um, but also at the same time, um, damn it, why is my mind not working tonight?
But you make a good point that pressure improves people. Like pressure, and there's some I was gonna say metamorphosis, metaphor in there somewhere, like where they say the pressure on something, and anyway, but yeah, pressure causes you to improve, and if left to an object in motion tends to stay in motion, an object at rest tends to stay at rest, right?
Yeah,
So an object at rest is going to stay at rest without the pressure it takes
yeah.
to move that object. So that is a good point as well.
Well, and I
Um,
mean, it's an evolutionary corollary, where if you don't have the struggle of species, we wouldn't even be here.
yeah, yes, yes. This is a very good point.
Wait, squirrels can't find nuts in the
Wait,
desert.
I know.
I
I don't know what it relates to, but I think it wins the best comment award. Squirrels can't find nuts in the desert.
can confirm. Can
True
confirm.
that. Like and love that comment. I'm sure it has something to do with government. It says taking away your freedom. Bill says this. Taking away your freedom is what socialism is all about. And I can see that too. That's my definition of failed. So, but also, this is my thing. Everybody thinks inside these boxes of what's always been. Like, okay, this is what socialism means. This is what capitalism means. This is what this means. Like, we can create something that has never been created. That's what the founders of our country did,
Yeah.
right? They created something that has never been created. So we don't have to take socialism as it is and create a socialistic society. Like, what if we take the good parts of this and the good parts of this and the good parts of that? You know what I mean? And and maybe not just change everything, but just if we made tweaks as we go. The problem is I think that in general, the people with power do not truly have the interests of the whole.
Yeah. And over
I think
time they
that's the
never will.
problem. Yeah,
If not
and
if
that's
not
the problem.
actively held accountable.
Yes, and how do you actively hold them accountable besides voting, which I think is a farce anyway.
Well, voting on a local level, like I say, the closer it is to you, the more power you have, and you should keep your power more centralized to yourself. To your point, and I think this is an important statement that was made by Stephen. Capitalist is a Marxist term, and that's something that people need to remember. That capitalism was defined by an opponent of something. So not a proponent, but an opponent of something.
Go against something.
Yes.
You're gonna have to speak in third grade terms, please.
So if you are something and you define your terms, that's one thing, right? If
But
if
this was
your
against.
opponent defines the terms, it doesn't always translate to reality.
Gotcha.
So,
And that's what capitalism was? Is that what
well,
it is?
capitalism as defined by Marx is basically what we have now, which is corporatism. What
Yes.
could be in an honest discussion called corporatism, and that was the whole issue. That was that whole debate, whole discussion. It was not about the idea of free markets. It was about markets being controlled by corporate interests, and that being what we have now. The reason it's so important to say is because people use that term and people argue about that term where what we don't want definition capitalism by the definition. People like me, for clarity's sake, don't want capitalism by others' definitions. And that's what causes like the voluntarist movement where that all interactions should be voluntary, and where that was the other point I was trying to make about everybody having what they need. If that gift is voluntary from the people giving it, it's more sustainable and more powerful than it is if it's forced or
Forced.
coerced
Yeah.
or at
Yeah.
gunpoint or at risk of jail time or whatever else.
And I think you've gotten to a point where that I forgot. The correlation of my hate of big business and patriotism, because I think it is really one of the big dings in my patri patriotic views is that we're not really run by the government. We are run by this big business. We are run by laws are made by big businesses and lobbyists and things like that. So, and I think that's something that we could change. But again, we can't change it on a large scale. And how do you change it? You can't change that on a small
Yeah,
scale.
it's large scale. I mean, it's large scale collusion for a lot. And again,
Yeah.
part of the problem is that it doesn't impact most people's lives
Or they don't know.
directly.
They just,
Directly.
yeah,
Yeah.
they don't even realize that it impacts them. And it goes back to the same thing is that people can say all these things and they're going to be like, well, you don't vote, so you don't care, whatever. But you complain about who's the head of Amazon? whatever his name is.
Bezos. Bill just jumped
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, you complain that the first trillionaire or whatever, and he's like making money off all these people. Yeah, have you canceled your Amazon Prime account?
Yeah.
Like, that's to me a vote.
Yep, it is.
And that
Yeah.
and that's a vote for the big business. So, but that it would just take so many. Like
Well, and,
it's
and and
just so
when I say
many.
collusion, I mean we have the power to change theoretically, and this is the issue with the
Yeah.
federal government is that we have the power to change the people in power to not be susceptible to pressure from that system. So it's not like a one thing going on. It's in principle, if you look at it from high enough, it's one entity. The federal government
Yeah.
and the corporate environment is all one entity.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
part of the issue, that the interest
Yeah.
isn't of the American people at
It's of the
large.
corporation.
Yeah.
And you think about the people that we're talking about, these people in general that are like ordering from Amazon or, buying Nikes or whatever. I'm just saying things now. I probably shouldn't say words like that. But these are people who, like, let's just use name brands. So if I'm in a high poverty area and I have something that like they value that, that's where my status is born, right? So I have these Nikes, right? They don't even look at it like, oh, look, I'm supporting Nike, which is actually supporting child labor. And I don't know if Nike really does this. I couldn't think of another example off the top of my
They
head, but
probably do. You're
that's
probably safe.
that's supporting child labor somewhere. Like that's too far to think. It's too separate from me. I know that these Nikes are going to give me street cred,
Yeah.
you know? So these are the people we're expecting to vote for, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not direct impact. There's a lot of comfort. And like you
Yeah,
said, an object at rest. And we as the American people are largely at rest.
yeah, yes, yeah, yes. Hmm. So maybe if we were a nation, no, because if you look at nations that aren't at rest, I don't want to be there.
Well, and conflict doesn't always have to be violent. Uh but you have things like you see a lot of people standing up against like mask choice at school and stuff. Little
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
here and there where it's not necessarily about something you agree with, but you see people taking a stand on something that seems kind of insignificant. But those are the kinds of things that's where you start. That's where it
yeah,
starts. That's how movements are built, is to do the tiny little things that you think don't have any impact. And really to have conversations like this with people and to have open conversations and free conversations that don't end in yelling and don't end in accusations and don't end in name calling, where people change their mind and start to realize. I mean, it's how you educate people about how it feels like it doesn't impact you directly, but here's how it does.
yeah. And I think education is awareness, and education is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Um, do you think, I don't know if there's anything we have to address here. Do you think power, ego, fear, and control rules? Yes, absolutely. And money. But money is power, I guess.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to greed really being a thing. I think it's more power, and I think that's part of that cycle. And I'm sure people will come at me for that one. People I know would definitely come at me for that one. But ego,
But
I think.
I think it's ego and also fear, like, and this could be because I watched too many movies, but like no, that's not even true. I've been caught up in situations before, like we're talking very low scale, nothing like the government, and I've been caught up where I am doing all of a sudden doing something I don't actually believe in, but to back out of it would cause, like, in my life on a very small scale, like disaster. You know what I mean? Like I might
Yeah,
get fired or this might happen. Like, so I can imagine, like, on a larger scale, you get caught up in the system.
yeah, and
And
I
part
mean,
of
even
that,
when you talk about things like divorce or abuse, you see that
yeah,
100%. I see what you're
yeah,
saying.
you're caught up in the system. So I think part of that power, ego, and fear is just part of the system, being in the system as a whole. So if you take out that one individual, maybe on their own they're not that way, but once you put them in the system, they're part of the clog that creates that. Sorry, now I have to read it out loud. But I'm sure you guys want to know the comments too. Back in the 60s, the Kennedys were very powerful. The 70s and 80s, the last one, Ted Kennedy, died pretty much. They're not coming back. It's the way the world works. Some more powerful when they die. Oh, some are more powerful and then they die. Are you saying there's a conspiracy and the Kennedys were killed off because they were powerful?
I think it sounds like it's essentially that when you have something so large that the people don't matter, the individuals don't matter.
Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, so I don't always understand the comments, especially when I just random.
Well, and I could be wrong too. I agree with Steven. I don't take the stickers off my Nikes. You should see my
What is
ball caps, dude.
what does
Still
that
got
mean?
my just. He's being a
Is
dummy.
that street cred
It's a
thing?
status symbol, man.
Oh, okay.
Keep them
Our
clean.
existence takes
Keep
care
them
of it,
new.
or morality takes care of it.
No, morality or mortality takes care of the
Oh,
powerful.
mortality takes care. No, because they're just I uh, yes, on an individual basis, but again, it's so systemic that one person dying off is irrelevant.
Yeah. People are irrelevant.
Yeah, because the system runs it. Now, in general, that's what you want. You want a system to be able to run even if one person dies off from that system. If you think of running a business, you want your system to continue to run even if you were taken out of the equation, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. But
All it takes is one person
but
to fuck it up.
the system sucks. It's the system. Oh, you said F word. You want
Yeah.
me to sing a Frozen song really quick to cover it up?
No. No, that's the real F word.
What happens when
So,
they start transferring their consciousness into robot bodies?
oh my god. No, that's too far. I'm not.
Steven wants
No,
Steven
I'm
wants
gonna
to go
ask you.
AI on
I'm
us.
gonna ask you a question. Yeah, he can join the transhumanist party, and we can get all through
That's
that.
Steven will
Um,
do another episode. I'm sure there are Facebook groups I can join on
yeah,
AI love.
get somebody from the transhumanist party, and we can talk about AI rights in the future and things, and it'll be interesting. We'll talk about that off
Yeah,
off
I'll
broadcast
write that
here.
down. Coming at you,
Um,
Steven.
so as we've discussed that we do not between us believe that we should force our ideals on others, and that the greatness of any place is basically defined by the people's willingness to be there, and no others' patriotism detracts, right? Um, damn it, Katie. Coming in with the Hurricane Elsa business. Trying to straight man this one here. So when you talk about, so are you familiar with the idea of isolationism? Where
I
that
mean, I know what the
we
word isolate
maintain.
means.
Okay, so here I'll read the definition that I have here. The policy or doctrine of isolating one's country from the affairs of other nations by declining to enter alliances, foreign economic commitments, international agreements, etc., seeking to devote the entire efforts of one country to its own advancement and remain at peace by avoiding foreign entanglements and responsibilities. It's a big one.
Switzerland.
Theoretically, yeah.
Yeah, Switzerland.
Yeah, and who knows if that's really true. That sounds like a
I was
very
gonna say I know nothing about
sounds like a very
Switzerland, but that's
stereotypical American like education thing. I'm not gonna lie. I've just never cared enough to break that one.
to research and see if Switzerland is actually neutral.
So what do you think about that idea as far as our interactions with other nations?
That is such a good point as well, because we do kind of stick our nose in. This is the problem. As I think through it, if I was to think idealistically, right? Like I feel like we're helpers. We want to help, but I think we stick our nose in because of the big picture system and money and greed, and it's part of all that. If I felt like it was truly altruistic, do I think that America goes on peacekeeping missions out of total altruism? No, I don't, because the people making the decisions are not altruistic people. And I know that is a very broad statement, but I would bet a lot of money on that, right?
Yeah.
Like and in their defense, they have a system to keep running That's their job to keep this giant system running. And so they make decisions based on that. So with our current setup, I think it'd be nice if some of that effort came back to America, but only because I know it's not altruistic.
As part, so you want it to be in good faith, is what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
That you are open to good faith. You're not an isolationist in the idea that you want your foreign entanglements to be in good faith.
Yeah.
I would.
And a
I'm
lot
not
of
going to disagree with that
they don't want us
sentiment.
over there. Like some countries are like, why are you here? Like, get out.
Well, and without getting into like the whatever nation building and all that, yeah, I think that for it to be in good faith, it requires an
And
agreement.
acceptance.
Yeah. Yes, an
Yeah,
acceptance. Yeah.
from
Agreed.
the other country. Steven has an interesting question. Stop ruining things for me, Steven. Steven asks, is the Pledge of Allegiance a form of brainwashing? Damn it, be patriotic and just say the pledge. I don't know. Is it a form of brainwash? No, because I don't think anybody, but I think it's important to teach your the young people of a nation, right? About the nation and about love for the nation because they're going to grow hateful as they get older, right? So you got to start with the base of love.
That's an interesting statement. Because I'm not changing my stance on this based on that, but I would say that that's the intent of the Pledge of Allegiance, is to reinforce, is to casually reinforce a routine that supports our
The
nation.
nation.
But
Yeah.
the statement that you make about people more growing more hateful as they grow older is very complicated.
And true.
Very complicated. Yeah, it hits home a little bit as you become, and even and I try to keep this perspective within myself, but more critical. I would say more than hateful,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
as you
agreed.
know more, the more critical you become, and the
Yeah.
harder it is to be positive about things. That's kind of why we're here having this
Yeah.
conversation, right? Um,
Yes.
so that's interesting. That's an interesting thought
But also, so let's
about how
say,
we treat youth.
so I want to say that it's important if I take people out of it, if I take my opinions out of it, it's important for a nation in general not to have a raise a bunch of revoltists, right? It's important for the nation to somewhat agree with what's happening.
Now,
Because if
no, I
you,
disagree.
let's say instead of teaching the pledge, they said, here's what America is. What do you think? What do you want? What do you want to create? Like, if we did that, my point is that in my head, which again, I don't agree with what I'm about to say, in my head, people need to be somewhat compliant for a society to work.
I think that, and this is not going to come as any surprise, I think it's easier to find comply. I think compliance must come voluntarily, first and foremost. But I think that that compliance comes more readily and more agreeably when everyone is on the same page, and when you have local and community governance, it's more likely that everyone will
Which
be
is
on the
I
same page.
okay, because you have more commonalities,
Yeah.
more common interests, first of
Yeah.
all, and it's not as complicated. You have less pages,
Yeah.
basically, be on the same ones as yeah. Old people run the country because they're what? I'm not even reading the rest of that. That's
He's
ridiculous.
talking about Joe Biden being
Oh,
the
old
being the
people
wisest man. I think he's the oldest man in the nation, right?
in the
That's
nation?
no, I'm just.
Oh, like that's excessive.
But I,
I would say that is not I'd say wiser, no, more experienced, yes. And this is why. Let me just tell you. When you I feel like, and this is again a generality, um, older generations tend to be more stuck in their ways, whereas I see the younger generations coming up willing to be more open and hear things out. And when you're coming from, yes, you know a lot of things, you're wiser, But when you're not open to hearing different things, for example, the Constitution, when you want to just stick with the Constitution and not think about it, like that, I don't think that's wise.
Yeah, this
Old
is
countries run the people. Yeah, because we're an old country.
uh yeah, I'm just being a wise ass. Um
Well, I know. But 35, so Bill says that's what experience is there, wiser. It says in the Constitution you have to be 35 years old to be president. There's a reason for that experience. Yes. And first of all, 35 is not that old.
yeah.
Let me just say it. 35 is not that old at all. It is quite young.
And
And,
35 and 80 are
and
way different.
yeah, and 35, I think part of that, the importance of that, first of all, when they wrote that, people died at what age?
That's a reasonable question that I have an answer to.
Yeah, like that should actually be extended. But that was so you could have military service, right? And other forms of office in your background
Yeah.
as you move up the ranks. I think that's why that 35 is important.
And I don't think age in the world we live in, where if you think about information proliferation in the past, that we have such an advantage where we can basically know, most of us, not
Yes.
all of us are privileged enough to understand or know and have the resources, but most of us have a lot more access to information, even not even information that's being fed to us, but other information that we can get our hands on, that
Yes.
creates transparency, where that age limit, where if you set that age limit because you wanted a certain level of responsibility, we all know what everybody's been through. If you're running for
Yeah.
office, we have all the information. Like, we're good.
Yeah.
Um
We have all of the information about you. But also, I mean, that I will still agree with the age, that age is
oh
important
yeah.
to a degree. You would never let a 21-year-old like
Well, my
I don't know, do something. I can't think of something because they haven't had enough experience. It's just experience, and it's not it's experiences. And yes, as someone else said, there could be a 40-year-old with less experiences than a 21-year-old, and there could be tons of 21-year-olds that would run the country better than tons of 40-year-olds. But on average,
Well, and my point was just that because we have that information, that age limit being on paper is less important, because we have the information we need as voters to make those decisions
oh, like we
from a
know who
better
you
place.
are. So
Yeah.
you can put that age if you want, but we're not going to vote for a 21-year-old
Yeah.
anyway. Is that what you
Yeah.
mean? Okay.
That we have access to all of somebody's qualifications, and will be able to participate very thoroughly in the analysis of that person's background and
Yes.
capability of holding the office and everything else.
I know you're gonna
Oh,
love
yeah.
this, but I want to get into what's happening in the comments only because it points out what I've been saying, right? So they're talking about President Trump, and some people like him, some people don't, whatever. But one of the points was that he he's the implication is that he's a good president because he was worth a lot of money. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. No, about his like humanitarianism. Like I don't I think it makes him a good president for this government of big business. Absolutely. Because it is a government of big business, but I personally don't want it to be that government anymore. So I don't think your net worth is, to me, factor-inable. I mean, you have to be
Yeah,
able, you
you're
have to
good.
survive, factor-inable with with that. So I just wanted to point that out because it was just so like that's the kind of thing that really drives me crazy is that it's all about money and power.
Well, and I it's pointless for me to get too far into it, but I will say that part of the issue that I have is not the person themselves, but the people that we see that treat our president like a deity. There is such hero worship from the populace, and not the populace at large, potentially, because it's probably, whatever, whoever shows up to polls or whoever shows up to the ballot, 60% or whatever of the nation. But there's so many of those people that are worshipers of that position.
And they're, you know what? And I would say that this is another thing I struggle with as well. That I, it is my duty as an American to respect the president, no matter who it is, because he has been voted into office, right? And he is the leader of the nation. Now, I don't have to agree with him, I don't have to like him, but the government that and this is old me, my patriotic self, the government that I believe in has voted him into office, right? And so with that comes an amount of respect and I'm trying to say it in the right way. Like you respect your parents, but you don't always agree with them, and sometimes you stay out too late anyway. Like so, it's not like worship, but that kind of thing. Like you know what I mean. There's an ounce of respect is the only word that I could think of. But yeah, I think the other side of it, the two extremes, where you deitize and or condemn,
It's the same thing.
like
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think that is a healthy. Again, our government voted him in. If you don't like that he is there, look at the government.
Yeah.
This is the government that voted him in. These are the people that voted him in.
Yeah. When you look at, so when I talk about deifying, the God and Satan are part of the same. Uh,
Yeah,
oh, shit, I'm losing a word here. This is a rough
cycle
night for me for words.
system. I know it's usually me.
Yeah. The same. Anyway, they're the same. Yeah, they're the same system. We'll go with system.
They're the two ends of the same.
Yeah.
Oh,
So to treat them that way is the same thing. To
yeah.
universally demonize or to universally worship without critical thought
Yes.
is
Yes.
a problem.
Agreed. Agreed. And so what metric would I use? This Bill wants to know my point, my view. I don't know. He's probably talking to someone in the chat, but
He's
I
not.
feel
Yeah.
like he's talking
You
to me.
go
He wants to
roll
know
with it.
he wants to know what I think. You know what? I don't even think I know enough to answer that question in depth enough. I will admit I'm too ignorant to know exactly what it would take to be the best president. I know that no one knows until they get there, right? Like, even what I did like about Trump is like, he's like, shit, this stuff is hard. Like, like, said what is happening.
Yeah, there
Like,
was no
I was,
subtlety.
yeah, I was going over the budget and like, you think you know what the budget means until you come and you look at this budget. Anyway, so I wouldn't know, but I think that it'd be I liked the idea of Trump because he was different and not a politician. And that's what I would vote on. Somebody who we know what this man that we always vote
This
for,
man,
this,
this
is the
little man I'm
man.
holding up in
This
front of you.
this this is the man. If I had a bobblehead, this is the man. And this is the man we always vote for. Whether it's Democrat or Republican, to me, it's irrelevant because they're the same man. And they might make value judgments on this side versus that side. To me, y'all are voting for the same man. He's the same man. So even Obama, in my opinion, was the same man. I just think something different. And that's why I thought Trump might have been a good idea. Um, Oddly, maybe Trump wasn't politician-y enough. I don't know. I don't know. I just think that it'd be nice to
It's a
change things
reflection
up.
of our society, and that's what you see in office at all times. Government is
Yeah. And
reactionary,
that's what we
and that's
value.
why one term nobody can make impact no individual can make sufficient impact. I mean, they can screw things up, I guess, but one person's term in office is not sufficient to make change because it is a
To make
reflection of
enough
our
change to
society.
be detrimental.
Well, I think probably more likely detrimental than beneficial, but at large, I would say it's a reflection of our society.
And that way it stays consistent.
Yeah, so those
Where the
people will
consistency
change
comes in.
beneficially or
Yeah.
detrimentally the more we change as a society.
And that's kind of good,
Yeah,
right?
it's
That
just
seems
too
like a good
slow
thing. It
for
is
us. Like
slow, but it
the
also,
longer we live and everything else, the slower it feels.
you're right. And that is why it's so slow. But also, if it was faster, it could crumble faster
It could be true, yeah. But also, I
because
mean,
it may not go up
you'd have that
faster.
conversation about
It's
whether that's
not about
beneficial or
gender,
not.
Bill. It's about something different. I think we can all agree that we have gone with the same gender
Wait, who's gender?
with every president. It doesn't have to be female, just something different.
To Katie's point, we have so much information now. Is Google helpful or causing more confusion? So I pulled up my show notes, which I haven't actually
Good point,
opened my show
Katie.
notes, but one of the most impactful things on my previous show notes for whatever the topic was, because it wasn't last week's, was children are natural philosophers. And the reason that they're natural philosophers is because they ask why, and it's something that we lose
Yes.
as we age.
Not to, and it's pushed out of
Yeah.
us,
Oh
in my
yeah. I mean,
opinion.
that's a fair point. Yeah.
Not just naturally lose, it's pushed out
Yeah.
of us.
So
You don't ask
I think
why.
access to information is inherently beneficial, but we have to learn how to use information appropriately.
Well, and the problem to me, like to Katie's point, I think the problem with Google is you can't always, you don't know if you don't know if the information is
You just
accurate.
got to dig deeper then.
And very difficult to verify. At some point, like, again, people just say
Yeah.
things. Even and you can do, just like I say, I can do a study that proves both sides
Yeah.
of every experiment. You know what I mean? And it's just you have to dig like really deep, and I think beyond Google deep.
Oh yeah. The veracity of a source should not be accepted, um, generally ever, and you should always question where you're getting it from. And that's the why I'm talking about, is why would they be
Yeah.
saying this, right? Like, not necessarily
Yes.
what are they saying, but why. And you can
Why?
keep looking to find the sources. And sometimes you get into an echo chamber. I'm not going to lie. I do the
Yeah.
same for myself, which is why I have shower thoughts and time to think about all these ridiculous nonsense things that we talk about sometimes on the show, is because I actively do that. But it's an active process. And you have to do
Yeah.
that. You have to be constantly
Yeah.
questioning if you're ever going to better yourself. And
Yeah.
we're all comfortable, so we don't have time for it. We've got too much time
Which
for, patio beers
doing
and hiking
doing
and doing
podcasts.
podcasts. Yeah.
I would like to point out that Jacob said that my background is sweet. Also, Jacob, let me tell you, after I put this background up on my Facebook ads, a metal
Art
like
thing.
art piece was in my Facebook ads to buy this exact thing. And all I did was right click and save as this picture.
And don't
Crazy.
worry, Jacob, my flag collection will be making a reappearance after September, which feels like a really long time away. Um,
They're watching you. Shower thoughts. I call them P Tinas. Wait, what?
I don't.
Katie says, I would like to read this quote
I
directly, please. Katie says, shower thoughts, dot, dot, dot. I call them P, dot, 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 Tina's.
Perikas.
She said TMI.
I don't. Well,
That's
so
the
here we
best.
are. Here we are,
Here we are. Here we are at P shower
and
thoughts.
it's late here
I
in
know.
Eastern
Dude,
time.
we went ranty. Ranty.
That's good. That's good. So what do we
Yeah.
have going on next week?
Next week is sustainability in art.
Oh, that'll be a good one. It's an interesting one. It'll kind of come back to our previous discussion on public art too, a little bit.
Yeah, we will lighten the load. Yeah. Making sustainable art. It'll be good.
Yeah. Um,
It'll be good.
so for the sake of brevity tonight, just remember that patriotism is not ignoring the struggles of our country. It's facing them head on. Do not blindly defend them. We will see you next week for that conversation. Please follow, like, share, subscribe, do all the things below, so we can have more people in here having good conversations. You guys have been on fire tonight, and we appreciate it.
Fire!
Um,
Yes.
but we will see you next week. And in the meantime, have meaningful conversations.